it, lad. Sail's coming down. Here we go. Coming. High wheel. Building to tack here.
Nice. It started with a vision. Years of design, dedication and sheer hard work have now built to this. F50 wing-sailed catamaran, 6 of the world's fastest boats.
One down, go, go, go.
Boats that fly.
Okay, let's go, boys.
One design for all. An engineering masterpiece. Supreme athletes from 6 countries face off in the most thrilling global race on water.
That was full on.
This is Sailing Redefined. This is nation versus nation.
This is SailGP. Season 1 begins here in Sydney. Hello and welcome to the first ever SailGP event, and you have front row seats because we're perched on the edge of Shark Island, slap bang in the middle of Sydney Harbour, and we have a crack team ready to decipher all of the drama from the next 2 days racing. Lisa Darmanin and Shirley Robertson. Shirley, you're the first British woman to win consecutive Olympic gold medals, the first of which was in this harbour. It must hold some special memories.
Ed, I'm grinning just thinking about it. I mean, this is the greatest amphitheatre in our sport around the planet, so a very special sporting moment. And you know, in Sydney they're used to fast sailing boats, but they've not seen anything like this. The 6 fastest race boats in the planet, sailed by some of the biggest names and the hungriest young talent. It's going to be something else.
Lisa, you won a silver in Rio, but you learned to sail on these waters. You know them as well as anyone. How hard are they going to be to navigate for the F50s?
Well, firstly, we have an island in the middle of the racetrack, but it's very light winds today and there's a lot of land around. This is stadium racing and we do have some natural boundaries, so it's going to be not as fast paced, but there is going to be a lot of decisions that need to be made.
Okay, well, you've met our experts. Now it's time to meet the teams.
Hi, I'm Tom Slingsby. The Australian SailGP team is professional, competitive, patriotic.
I'm Phil Robertson. The Chinese SailGP team is
young, multicultural and fresh.
Dylan Fletcher. And the British team are raw, proud, relentless, hungry. What's that for?
I'm Nathan Atteridge, Japan SailGP team. Determined, resourceful, respectful.
I'm Rome Kirby. The United States SailGP team is young, humble, experienced, not experienced, that's Tom's. Damn it!
I'm Billy Besson. The French SailGP team is competitive, patriotic, fun.
Well, there's a real mixture in there. We've got veterans, young guns, offshore sailors and dinghy racers. What do you think the most valuable commodity for the sailors is going to be in the F50?
You know, Ed, all the sailors here are from a new generation of quick thinking. They're used to going fast and making decisions, you know, instantly. And I think that's going to be important. You're right, it's a heady mix of experience and America's Cup winners and young guns looking to make their mark in this world. So it's going to be hard fought.
I heard you saying earlier on you thought bravery might be an issue as well.
Yeah, you're going to have to take the brave pill. I think, you know, closing speeds of 100 miles an hour. I just can't even think how you would think that quickly and make decisions.
Lisa, one of the things that I think appeals to people about this championship is the fact that it's not about funding, it's one design. So it's all about the sailors' ability.
Yeah, they're literally all in exactly the same boat. They all have the same operating systems and the same amount of power. So it's going to come down to the communication, the teamwork, and getting and finding the win today.
Okay, what can we expect out there, Shirley?
I guess, you know, they're all a bit nervous, but it's the first race of something very exciting and they'll want to make the mark. I think the start will be exciting. It's all about the start. You have to get a great start and a great first leg, and I think that's going to be really competitive.
Yeah, all eyes will be on the start. Well, as Shirley said, we've got 6 of the world's fastest boats out in this harbour. And the one thing I can promise you over the next 2 days is no shortage of action. Well, we'll be bringing you all of the action over the next 2 days. We've got 3 races on today. They are fleet races, so all 6 boats on the water in each of those races. It is nation versus nation. It is athlete versus athlete, some of whom are renewing a rivalry that has lasted nearly a lifetime.
I've probably done the most number of days driving these boats out of anyone in the fleet, that's for sure.
It's got a lot of seamanship and different skills and how to manage the boat and the team.
I've probably done more hours on the water than anyone in this type of boat.
Slingers on the wheel, the guy's a weapon.
Myself and Nathan Outridge have probably got the most experience.
Tom's done quite a lot of driving. He'll slot straight in without a problem.
Japan against Australia, Slingsby against Outridge.
These boats, they're kind of like the F1 on water.
Heading, here we go.
They're quite a handful to sail at the best of times.
Good recovery.
If you push too hard, they do bite back.
Coming up on the wind.
We know that we can push the boat and we've got enough experience to say, guys, let's go hard here.
It terrifies me a little bit to think that we're going to be racing in with 6 boats all at once.
These things are dangerous.
Toe to toe, who will come out on top?
I first got into sailing through my father. He did a lot of Sydney to Hobart yacht races, so naturally I followed. I got into the junior classes in dinghies and then slowly moved through those.
I grew up sailing with Ian, and we've got to the point with our sailing that the communication's almost not required.
We've known each other for about 25 years. Nate's a great sailor.
I've spent the last 7 years as a tactician. I know the theory very well, but when it comes time to actually getting out there and doing it, it's not easy.
If we can get the team to function as a whole, I think we'll be in a good chance of doing well.
We've done a lot of hours together. We're all great friends. We're very comfortable.
It's going to be very interesting in Sydney to see how it all pans out.
Home for the SailGP boats here in Sydney is Cockatoo Island. It's an UNESCO World Heritage Site listed, and it's, over the course of its history, been a prison, a dockyard and a school. But this week, it's the official SailGP technical area. So this is it. The boats have made their way under the harbour bridge up to the sailing area. It's time for the talking to stop and the action to start. Shirley is joined in the commentary box with Alistair Eakin for the inaugural race of SailGP.
The inaugural race of SailGP, a seminal moment as the event is launched in one of the most iconic settings of all, here in Sydney Harbour as they race around Shark Island. And this is the kind of course that we'll be looking at. As usual, that first thrilling reach across wind, a couple of legs upwind and downwind, due to finish on the downwind leg. Conditions today, glorious sunshine in New South Wales. A light breeze forecast to fluctuate between around about 8 to 14 knots. Plenty to get these flying machines up on the foils. So here we go then. The first race of the day, the first race of the entire SailGP Championship. 6 wing sail catamarans ready for action, 6 crews with adrenaline coursing through their veins, enormous excitement. But surely, as we know, fire in the belly has to be accompanied by some cool heads as well.
They're going to be a nervous bunch today, and you know, this start is not easy. To hit that line at maximum speed in these conditions, really difficult. Currently just watching the Aussie team. They look like they want to own the bottom end of the start line and are really controlling that spot. It's just when they go that's critical.
Well, if they get off the line clean and fast, they can dictate the race. The French are making really good headway. Japan and Australia in front at this point, but timing their run. The French crew under Billy Besson very, very tight to the Japanese, and they're across the line, and the Chinese, in fact, it is, who have started the fastest. The French have done extremely well. The Australians tucked in behind, but not really with enormous boat speed as yet. The Chinese, though, first to get up on the foil, Shirley.
Ali, speed is the king, and they timed that run from a long way out. Absolutely owned the first start here in Sydney.
The start of a brand new sailing adventure. SailGP is up and running down under, and it is the French who are leading the charge to Mark 1 with the Chinese close alongside. What a sight. 6 boats sweeping across Sydney Harbour, and round the first mark it is Billy Besson, considered something of an outsider, but making a storming start. Now though, with excellent boat speed, the Australians under the helmsmanship of Tom Slingsby, so experienced, so knowledgeable of these waters in particular. At the moment, USA and Japan, the back markers, as they jibe downwind for the first time this afternoon. What a start that is, and what an ideal moment to bring in the boss man of SailGP, the CEO, Russell Coutts. Russell, you'll be thrilled with the way that looks and the excitement already generated.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic start. Great to see Phil Robertson put it out there. That was a pretty high-risk start at the top end of the line. He could have easily been shut out by the other boats, and the first moment in the race, and he pulls it off. The French just did a terrible jibe right there. I mean, terrible. Their handling's been letting them down.
I mean, I think we're seeing how crucial it is to be able to stay on the foils and to execute excellent manoeuvres. We saw the British parked back there. Commanding performance here by the Japanese, nearly doing 30 knots, just overtaking the Chinese here and Phil Robertson.
Terrific bit of work done by Nathan Outridge, the Australian who's in charge of the Japanese boat. Coming close to the boundary, pushing the boundaries, and on collision course with the Chinese. Goodness, how close that is between Japan and China. And once again, they're having to bear away and avoid confrontation, involved in a right royal tussle as the French head to the boundary edge themselves.
Yeah, if anyone thought Phil Robertson was going to be suffering from nerves from this, doesn't look like it. You know, he's putting it out there.
He's racing fast, he's racing aggressively, and of course a man who's spent a good deal of his sailing time in match racing. Those one-on-one duels really critical to him, so important to his competitive makeup. But it is Japan and Nathan Outridge who are flying towards that first downwind gate.
Nathan Outridge, he's played it down. Everyone thought he was the favourite, but he's come out here and put in an incredible performance. Interesting to see where they decide to go at this bottom gate. It's a really small course in Sydney Harbour, and when you're doing 30 knots, you get to the boundaries really quickly.
Looks like we got the first split of the race. The Japanese heading one way, and the Chinese, under Phil Robertson, heading in the other direction. The French, after that blistering start, just looking to recover a little bit, maintaining good boat speed, and the rest, at the moment, nowhere.
I mean, when I looked at the course, I loved that left-hand side. The wind looks fresh and stronger on the left. When you get to the right, where the Japanese are going, you start to get under the wind shadow of Shark Island.
Here we're seeing the replay of that very, very tight cross between the Japanese and the Chinese. It goes without saying, they do everything in their powers to avoid coming together, surely, not least because they're incredibly expensive boats, and they've only got one of them.
The Japanese must keep clear in that situation, and Nathan manages to pull that off.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can see it's a light wind day, obviously, today. I think they've got around 7 knots, and when you look at the screen, you can see the different shades of darkness and light, and that's what the sailors are looking at. They're really looking to see where the wind is. The best sailors in the world can read the wind on the water and plan their course, and certainly full marks to Nathan Outridge. They obviously looked at that bottom mark gate and decided to go that way, and looks like they've made a gain.
Australia sailing away to the right-hand side of your screen, in last place at the moment, having raced so strongly in practice yesterday. But we have a 1, 2, 3 of Japan, China and France currently, and not a great deal between second and third. Nathan Outridge, as he will be very keen to do, surely, sailing his own race, choosing his own route, and of course searching, hunting all the time for little puffs of wind.
They're smooth when you watch them as well. When you hopefully will see them do a manoeuvre, it's so slick. He's sailing with a lot of the team that he sailed with at the Olympic Games and at the America's Cup, and I think when it gets tricky like this in light winds, that's when they begin to shine.
So Nathan Outridge and Japan sailing away out in front as it stands.
20 seconds, not that long.
Keen to play down the favourites tag, Nathan Outridge, but the man who unquestionably has the most amount of experience in terms of driving these boats, which are fearfully difficult. So many buttons, apart from anything else, and of course half the fleet has not been all that used to sailing with buttons, only the one rope.
Lovely overhead view here of the pressure. You can see on the left-hand side the darker water coming down. And I think the Japanese did really well. They went to the right, but then they came back before they were interfered with Shark Island. And beautiful job there.
So the Japanese making a decent gain currently. The Chinese, who are just on the tail of Nathan Outridge, who won't feel safe at this point. Plenty left to do, of course. And Phil Robertson is enjoying his first outing in competitive match racing here in Sydney Harbour.
I spoke to him the other day, Ali. He said he's learning something new every 10 minutes. It's all new, but he is absolutely loving it. And he's had moments out here training where he's really shone.
Japanese out in front.
Actually, Billy Besson's got a nice little gust of wind. You can just see the dark line just above him, so he's able to accelerate in that, and he's coming into probably a little bit of lighter breeze now, but he's, right up there.
Able to apply the heat from third place, Billy Besson and the French crew.
Yeah, on the far side of that grade.
But it is Nathan Outridge who's setting the pace currently. USA tucked in behind them.
Touch and go, mate.
And the crowd on Shark Island able to get a wonderful view now of the Japanese as they manoeuvre. And those manoeuvres absolutely key. If they're clean, if they're crisp, if the hulls are out of the water for the most part of it, they can maintain their boat speed, Shirley. Touchdown and you're losing pace quickly.
I mean, at least 10 knots, if not. In these light conditions, probably more. And the big tactical decision here as they approach the gate is which one to go around. And I think we'll see most of the boats choose the one on the right-hand side of the screen and just get away from Shark Island and the effects of that.
Check how far behind the Australians are. Wow. Definitely against the form.
Yep, they're a long way back, and Tom Slingsby will not be a happy man. The competitive fire burns very bright indeed. Top of your screen, top towards the left, the Australians. Another very tight crossing between the French and the British boats. Chinese, who made an excellent start, picking up decent boat speed as well.
Well, Ali, the British have incurred a penalty from that infringement.
You have a penalty relative to France. Penalty relative to France.
Yeah, that was the coming together with the French crew, and that will take a little bit of time to be burnt off. The boats have to expend their penalties by slowing the boat down a boat length. That's judged by the umpires who are taking care of business there, and they will alert the boats as to when it has been served. Here's the tight crossing.
Well, I think, Ali, in this instance, the umpire can choose to make it longer. If it's felt that they gained an advantage from infringing the rule, then it can be a longer wait. And we've seen the British; they've been waiting and waiting and waiting until the French boat then gets ahead.
So Billy Besson outmanoeuvring Dylan Fletcher, in charge of the British boat and almost doubling the speed of the British as well. USA taking a long old time to make their way up the course, Russell.
You can see in that picture that the Chinese are right on the edge of a dark line. They're in good breeze, probably making a little bit of a gain on the Japanese at that point.
Yeah, I mean, they've got beautiful speed here. I mean, just nearly touching 30 knots, Japanese doing 18. Lovely acceleration.
Tight to the boundary, the Chinese, but always maintaining their speed, which is so essential here with the leader, Nathan Outridge, and Japan.
Well, he's just fudged his drive, so probably left turn. Because I don't think he'll lay in, though. So if we go left turn, I'm pretty sure he's going to follow.
Well, lovely onboard comms. We heard Ian Jensen the right-hand man to Nathan, just discussing what to do, that he would lay in, but his opposition wouldn't, which would mean he'd have to do another maneuver. So lovely judgment by the Japanese team.
And flying into the gate, heading upwind once more with a comfortable lead at this point, Russell.
Oh, massively, yeah. I mean, they're flawless, and don't forget they did not come off the start line well. In fact, I think they may have even been last around turning mark 1 or near to it. Executed the first jibe well, got into a patch of favoured breeze and gone. Conversely, the Australians were lying in third on that first reach and just got rolled out of that first mark and are now pretty much done.
Well, it'll be very interesting to hear the thoughts of Tom Slingsby a little later on, perhaps, because he's been sailing so well. Their boat has been flying across the water in practice, as we see the Chinese, who will be well pleased with this start to their campaign, Shirley.
I had high expectations for them. They've looked great in training. Every day they've come out, they've looked more and more confident, and it's about confidence. You know, you have to be able to position your boat in the right place to know that you're going to pull off a maneuver, and every day, you know, the crew have got better and better, and I think we've seen that here today.
No reason to attack, really.
That experience that we talk about, Russell, I'd be interested to hear your view on this, but the skipper's very much saying that, quite apart from the confidence of the boat handling, it's the ability to shake off the error and just tuck it to one side and perhaps manipulate your way through the troubled waters, so to speak.
Well, there's no sense in focusing on the past. You can't change that. You've got to look at the future and just focus on how you can get back in the game. But you've got to think the Japanese fans are going to be watching this, are going to be pretty happy right now.
We're above field line as well, so...
Little doubt about that.
Happy
They
to go
are
early, because we're going to be
going
above field anyway.
at full lick, well led. And of course, Nathan Outridge helping to grow a generation of young Japanese sailors as well. The aim is to make sure that that boat in a few years' time is staffed by an entire crew of Japanese sailors.
Well, the French team here, led by Billy Bisson, 4 times world champion in the small foiling boat in the Olympic Games. And he's brought with him his crew from the Olympics. Marie Rioux, she's the flight controller. And, you know, it's all about communications and trust. And he was absolutely the first call.
Sometimes we've seen, certainly in the last few days that we've been here, a little erraticism from the French. They've been brilliant in parts, and yet some of their manoeuvres are lacking stability too.
There's not a great deal of finesse yet, I'd say, with the French team, Ali, but you know, every day they're getting it better and better, and Billy's really good kind of free sailor. Let's just watch them do attack here.
In the meantime, Japanese out in front, setting the pace and enjoying that open water. What a start they've made. On board with the Japanese. The grinders up front, enabling the wing trimmer to do his job. Tucked in behind them with the rope on that winch, just adjusting things as necessary. And at the moment, it's a team very much in sync. And this should be their last manoeuvre into the finish line.
Look behind them, Ali. I mean, one thing this boat is humbling. These are some of the world's best sailors, and the best sailors at sailing this kind of boat at this kind of speed, and they're a long way back.
So what a start to the Sydney SailGP for the Japanese outfit, led by Nathan Outridge, and from not the best of starts, they have come flying through the fleet and have sailed a very accomplished race. Race 1 of SailGP in Sydney, won by the Japanese, who pocket the full 10 points. Terrific start, and what that might do to confidence levels and belief as they head through the next couple of races and into tomorrow, and of course thereafter at the second event in San Francisco, followed by New York and Cowes and Marseille for the big money race at the end, as we see the rest of the fleet, Russell.
Yeah, I think the British in particular, you know, I mean, Dylan Fletcher and Chris Draper, they are just, they'll be ruining that penalty. They had a chance of capturing at least a third, and now they've just dropped right out of it. They've actually got to be careful they don't drop back further.
Massive mistake. I mean, maybe we put that down to nerves. I mean, pretty obvious mistake to be caught there, and as Russell said, it's cost them dear.
Chinese, meanwhile, have perhaps sprung a little bit of a surprise. We all know the talent levels on board. Certainly, Phil Robertson doesn't look or appear like a man who's short of confidence. He has great belief in everything that they might be able to achieve across this season. Well, they are just a little bit in behind the Japanese, but they will finish strong in second.
Well, Phil realised how important it was to sail at the venue, and he was here, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks before this all kicked off, just sailing a small catamaran, just getting used to the peculiarities of Sydney Harbour.
Well, I've got to say, I was impressed that he put it out there. He backed himself at the start. You know, first race of SailGP, and he doesn't do anything conservative. He just puts it out there and has a go, and you know, you got to take your hat off to him.
Terrific race from the Chinese crew. Second place for them, and a job well done. And this event, the very, very early stages of it, dominated by Asia. France, in the meantime, have slowed right up, but they've maintained their position in the fleet. With a little bit more consistency, you feel there's bags of talent on board, Shirley. They could really be a bit of a wild card.
I really think so. I mean, you know, there's a lot of data coming off these boats and a lot of data to analyse after racing. And I spoke to Maru the other day, and she said, I think when we race, we're just going to forget all that and we're going to sail. And I think we've seen them do that here. They got the start they wanted, and they've sailed the race that they wanted to do, and it's very impressive. Incredible natural talent and learning quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's probably only about 4 knots of breeze at the top of this course. So
now, what's going on here? We have an interesting scenario for the French. Shirley, thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure what they're thinking, but they should have crossed that line. They should have gone through the gate to finish the race, and they seem to have sailed off to the left-hand side.
So the French still got work to do. They've got to cross that finish line. A slightly curious route has been taken. In the meantime, Britain, Australia and the USA bringing up the rear. So as we see the remainder of the fleet heading up towards the finish line, we're going to speak now to Nathan Outridge, the helmsman on board the Japanese boat. Nathan, many congratulations. Great to get off to a winning start. What was the key moment for you? Because you didn't have the best of starts.
And then it went back left. No, we actually had quite a shocking start. Got too close to the line and everyone went straight past us. But I think that key race-winning move was those first 2 jives. The first jive inside the fleet into the fresh air behind Shark Island, and then we had a really close situation with Phil. I thought we were going to cut his rudder off at one point, but managed to get around him, and then we were just sort of keeping the fleet in check. So really good to post the first win.
And in terms of the campaign as a whole, Nathan, what will the effect be on your team of this early success? It must really breed belief and a bit of momentum.
Yeah, well, this event's been a long time coming. We've been waiting for this event for the best part of 9 months, and formulating the team. And there's no better way to reward not just the sailors' hard work, but all our shore team's hard work in getting us to where we are. So, it's a good step in the right direction, and we're stoked with the result, and we're looking forward to 2 more races today.
And Nathan, just briefly, in terms of 1 or 2 personal battles out there, we know that you're all tremendous rivals, the 6 of you. To have laid down a marker first up, you'll be pretty chuffed with that, I imagine.
Yeah, no, we're very happy with that. We said earlier today we want 3 top 3s. That's going to put us in good shape tomorrow. Obviously, you take the wins when they come, and now we've just got to keep it together for the rest of the day. But as I said, there's nothing better than winning the first race of a brand new series.
Thanks for your time, Nathan.
All right, cheers, guys. Thanks.
So, in the interim, the USA still battling to the line, but the British have gone through and finished, and the French did not go through the finish line. So, something of a calamity at the end for Billy Besson and his crew. And in the meantime, the Americans who've endured a pretty tough start out here in Sydney. They didn't look overly confident, Shirley, in the practice. And of course, it's come to pass as well on the opening race here with, you know, so much talent on board that boat as well. Young talent, admittedly, but the Americans won't be pleased with that finish.
Yeah, they're going to be disappointed. I mean, I think, you know, Rome Kirby is a great natural talent. He's won the America's Cup, but never in this role. And as you say, it's a really young team, and they have a lot to learn. But, you know, we expect more from them. And as we've seen in practice, you know, they have been struggling.
So the fleet are now through. And everybody, bar the French, has managed to finish successfully. The fallout will continue, no doubt, and we'll get to the bottom of exactly what happened there at the finish line for Billy Besson.
So the first race, the inaugural race of SailGP is completed, and as we predicted, Lisa, there was no shortage of drama.
We saw so many lead changes. We saw the boats foiling, not foiling, so it wasn't the high-paced speeds that we were expecting, but the difference is that, you know, on a normal boat you might lose 1 or 2 kilometers an hour when you slow down, but these boats are going from 30 knots to 5 knots.
And it's a huge gap. The start was the dream start in so many ways, because you had that close proximity sailing, which at these speeds in itself is very dangerous, but 4 boats out foiling at high speed.
That's what we wanted to see. It was quite surprising though. The Japanese had a terrible start, but we saw them first to the bottom gate. So the French had a fantastic start. They had speed when they hit the line. So even though the Australians were closer to the line, the French were going quick and overtook them in an instant.
Well, we've seen it a couple of times, and we wanted to talk about this. These boats are fast in a straight line, and you can tune them for speed. The hardest part of sailing them, though, is the corners, the tacks and the jibes.
Yeah, we saw a lot of teams that haven't sailed these boats a lot struggle in the turns. What happens is they were foiling, and then when they try to turn the boat, they fell out of the sky. They had to build their speed again, and that just takes so much time. But we saw people like Nathan Outteridge that know these boats and have the confidence just whip them around.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about that, just how smoothly he sails this boat.
Nathan just has such a cool style. He just throws the boat round. He's in control of it, and you know, he's not afraid.
Welcome back to the studio, joined now by 5-time America's winner, Sir Russell Coutts. Pleasure to have you here, Russell. That's the headline, but you're probably better known within the sport as someone who thinks outside the box, a visionary. This is your dream come to fruition. How do you feel?
Oh, fantastic. You know, it's a great first day. I mean, the wind's a little lighter than what we'd like, but still good racing, and, you know, that's what it's all about.
And Shirley, these guys have had comparatively little time in the boats, and yet what we saw on the start line there gave us a glimpse of what they're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, they want to do well. But, I mean, I suppose what I'm most surprised at is there's not very much wind, 4 or 5 knots. They're doing 30 knots downwind. It's quite the spectacle. And what a masterclass from the Japanese team. Quite something.
You've been talking about that, Lisa, the style that Nathan Outteridge brings to the boat.
Nathan just has so much confidence. He's sailed fast boats his whole life, and we saw that in the tacks and jibes. He'd just whip the boat round and be foiling within a few seconds.
Yeah, he made it look deceptively easy, I think. We can take a look now at the start. This is where most people were quite nervous, because these are big boats capable of enormous speeds, and they're in very close proximity.
Yeah, well, the amazing thing is Phil Robertson coming in at that top end of the line. That's a gutsy move, you know, lining up there. You can see the French also timed the start a lot better, and the Japanese at that point just looked parked.
Yeah, Nathan Outridge looked like he was going to be left behind, Shirley.
Maybe he's given them all a chance, Ed, perhaps. I mean, I was also impressed by the Chinese. Phil Roberts is used to this kind of street-finding kind of sailing, and I think when it gets hard like that, he shines, really.
Okay, we can take a look at Mark 1 here, and I think the local knowledge comes in here, Lisa, because we saw Billy Besson he timed the start perfectly, very quick in a straight line, but he literally sailed into a hole in the wind, didn't he?
Yeah, here on Sydney Harbour today we have a very light sea breeze, but there is a headland and all the teams ran out of wind. So even though we had the French and the Chinese and Nathan was at the back of the pack, the Japanese team was able to stay in the wind.
Yeah, I was going to say everyone ran out of wind except for the Japanese boat. Back there in 5th place, Russell, a fantastic move from Nathan Outridge.
Well, yeah, but the others sort of opened the door. You can see the French here, they did a terrible job. And that really just stopped them. They should have been leading that race at this point. Nathan got the nice gusts right here, jived into a nice gust. Now he's right back in the race.
One question for you, Shirley. What happened to Tom Slingsby there?
Oh. I think manoeuvring's really hard, particularly when it's light and you lose so much pace, and just did a bad manoeuvre and it got worse and worse. And
one of the things with him though, he's looked so dominant in practice, and then he essentially came in here as the favourite.
Nervous, maybe. You know, it's his patch. He really wants to do well. It's his team. His home country. Maybe it's a bit of first race nerves.
I think he'll be ruining the fact that he didn't jive earlier at that first mark too. He was set up quite high, so maybe he thought he could and keep clear of the boat behind, but clearly that was the move, because there was, Nathan showed there was clearly more wind there.
Yeah, well, we saw Nathan come through, and then we had that little coming together nearly. It must have been heart-in-mouth moment for you, Russell, with these boats. Very, very nearly getting some contact here.
Yeah, well, I never had any collisions when I was racing.
What do you make of this, Lisa? Because Nathan's come right in what looks like the shadow of the wind under Shark Island there.
Yeah, I think the thing with these boats is that you've got to turn the boat before you run out of wind. So Nathan made that decision to turn the boat before he ran out of the wind, and Phil had to react to him. So we've got 6 boats racing, and it's really a boat-on-boat action here.
I mean, what we see here, Ed, is just how aggressive Phil Robertson of the Chinese team is sailing. He wasn't giving the Japanese an inch, and you heard a little bit of shouting there too.
Okay, it's just under 10 minutes to the next race. Tom Slingsby, for one, will be looking for some redemption. It's going to be very, very interesting. Okay, a new class of boats puts extreme demands on these sailors, but there is a new generation of young sailors who are they're nervous and equally excited to get in these sleek carbon fibre racing machines. And I managed to catch up with one of them, the Team GB SailGP helmsman, Dylan Fletcher.
So we're going to go upwind CFG, fairway to reach. Copy that.
For such big boats, the first thing that strikes me is how small this area is. It's actually really compact.
The actual cockpits are quite small because the boat's so light and we don't need much volume in the hull for when we're sailing.
Grinders working the handles at the front.
Yeah, so you've got position 1 and position 2. You've got Matt and Gottrell, aka Shrek, and Rich Mason up there. So yeah, they'll be grinding the 2 winch handles on each side. That winch handle is driving this drum here. This is the winch. And
that's pulling in the wing.
And that's going to be pulling a massive wing. You see the 24 metres of wing. Wing trimmer sits here, and they're controlling this wing sheet. So these guys at the front have got a real hard physical job, and Chris has got, the more technical job.
It looks more like a shuttle.
Yeah, there's a lot of displays that we've got going on. There's lots of everyone's got their different controls and their buttons. We've got a joystick, Have never sailed a boat with a joystick before, so it is futuristic, but you see that with the speed of the boats and how fast they go for such a small amount of wind.
What's our target here, Chris? 21.5.
When we're coming up to attack, for example, the first thing that I say is stand by.
Stand by!
And that means that we're about to start tacking. So what happens is Chris, in position 4, which is trimming the wing, and Shrek in position 1. Grinder, they get up and they sprint across the boat.
I'll be Chris, okay, so I go across here.
So you run across, getting the cockpit, and shout clear. In the time that they've been running across the boat, I've dropped the board.
Board down.
As it starts to come down, Stu, in the flight controller position 3, says lock.
Lock.
As soon as he says lock, I start turning.
Turning.
And as soon as we're through the turn, I'll say on angle, then myself and Rich run over the boat. And then once we're both up, I then say my rake, and then Stu comes up.
It's so choreographed, isn't it?
Okay, stand by for barrel to reach.
Stand by.
Clear.
Clear.
Board down. Lock. Turning.
I like this. So Sydney Harbour looking resplendent on a Friday afternoon. Russell, Lisa, a dream first race, but we can go into a little bit of detail now, take a closer look at these boats. And I've got a theory, Russell, that essentially it's a plane disguised as a boat.
Yeah, it's probably more like an aircraft. There's certainly a lot to do on board for the helmsman and the wing trimmer and flight controller. And the other two are just working hard. I mean, they have to do certain things in the manoeuvres, but boy, it's a tough boat to sail.
You were the first guy to bring in the wing sail back in 2010. I mean, how much of a difference does it make having that solid wing rather than a sail?
Well, we weren't the first to use a wing sail. I mean, actually foiling and wing sails have been around for quite a while, but it does make a difference. You get you can achieve a much higher, what we call lift coefficient, which directly influences how much power you can generate in the wing. So it's much more efficient than a soft sail, and you know, you can see that even in very light winds like we had today, they can generate enormous power.
Okay, Lisa, we're going to go and have a look at the end of the last race, because there was a late bit of drama. The French looking very comfortable in third position, and then for some reason Billy Besson misses the finish.
Yeah, that's a major error by Billy and the French team, and I think there's just so much going on that, you know, they've just forgot to go to read the sailing instructions, read the rules, and to know how to finish the race. And that's the thing with sailing, is these are all imaginary lines. It's not like you're running across a ribbon or got the flag getting pulled down. You know, these guys have to know the course, and they got it wrong.
I'm actually wondering whether they had, you know, some miscommunication on board with the umpires, because you know, I mean, come on, he probably read the rules, I would assume, but they might have said, look, we're terminating the race at Mark 3, and maybe he misinterpreted that. I mean, their English isn't fantastic on board, so I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt.
It's, for me, you look at that, and you called it earlier, it's a decision-making sport, but there's so much going on. Is it possible that they just lost focus?
Well, no, I think there's communications from the umpires and the race committee, and the race management would have said that they had shortened the course at that gate. And I'm just you know, wondering, I guess because I just can't believe he didn't read the rules. So I'm just wondering whether there was they misunderstood the message or something crazy like that.
Okay, we'll have to wait and see. There are definitely two men about to take to the course who are looking for redemption. So thank you very much for coming on, Russell.
Thanks, Ed.
It's time now to get the second race underway. All eyes here will be on the Australians, but 6 boats ready on the water.
Race 2 then. What excitements and surprises lie in store for us this time around? Some of the early nerves will have diminished, a few creases ironed out by the teams, no doubt. The breeze is just threatening to strengthen a little bit, but at the moment it's down around the 5-knot mark. Essentially, conditions haven't altered substantially. To the start line they go, all beginning to jostle for position. I guess metaphorically getting their elbows out a little bit to try and attack the line the way they want to. Surely the dangers of early entanglement are pretty considerable, aren't they? They can have some serious ramifications for their race progress.
Yeah, and Ali, the slower you go, I mean, the harder it is to maneuver and the harder it is to get up to speed. So it's a balance between getting that position and make sure no one takes it, but also being up to speed at, you know, at the beat of bang.
So the French, of course, having made that excellent start last time around, but look at the way the Japanese are steaming into the picture with some 15 seconds left to go. They're cutting a very careful path through the fleet. Nathan Outridge looks to have timed this nicely with the Australians on the outside track. Great Britain coming up on the rails as well, and all of these boats up on the foils as they hit the start line. It is Japan in front from Australia and Great Britain. The Chinese going great guns as well. The USA, the back markers, as the Japanese head off towards the boundary on a slightly different route to everybody else.
Well, the Japanese got a penalty there, over slightly early, and they will have to slow at least one boat length back on the rest of the fleet.
A very unfortunate penalty for Nathan Outridge and Japan right at the
Japan,
outset. But what a sight that is as they head to Mark 1, the drag race, well and truly up and running.
What a confident start. Now that's what we're talking about.
So they round the first mark, and the British and the Australians are going at a great pace. Lovely to see them right up on the foils from the outset, and just to get an excellent view of how this racing should be, how it was meant to be. These boats are designed to fly. They are designed to go very, very quick.
Well, the British didn't follow the Chinese and the Australians. They're waiting. They're going right to boundary, but they can't cross that boundary or they'll get a penalty.
Away they go, and hoping to pick up a little bit of extra breeze on the outside edge of the course, potentially, allowing Australia to steal a march to some degree. Certainly the boat speed is good, and you can be very sure that Tom Slingsby will not have been happy with the Australians' fourth place finish in the opening race of his home event. A man who can see Sydney Harbour from his house.
He's hungry for this, Ali. He wants the win. You know, he's won the America's Cup, but not steering. Gold medalist in London 2012. He wants to walk away here, crowned the champion.
A very, very competitive man, and somebody who's locked horns on so many different occasions, of course, with Nathan Outridge, but an excellent race for the moment from the British crew. Dylan Fletcher is performing nicely, and they're manoeuvring in slightly careful, tentative fashion. The Australians are piling forwards. The Americans, we're hearing, have picked up a penalty on the boundary. Meantime, an excellent gate rounding by the Aussies.
Terrible jibe by the British. You know, you cannot go into one of those manoeuvres without everything absolutely perfect. The platform has to be flat. You've got to be ready to go. You've got to fly it beautifully round. And, you know, that's cost them a lot of speed and a lot of distance, and the lead.
We're on board with the Aussies here.
Popping in 2, 1, popping. Copy, going to go below him. Pressing.
He's talking about pressing. He's going for speed. They're sailing the boat fast. They're not looking for angle. They're looking for speed.
Limited talk back, isn't there, at the moment from the Australians? Tom Slingsby, obviously the man in control, but that communication and that choreography between them all is so critical, isn't it? We'll talk about it a lot through these events, Shirley, but the way that they can communicate with each other, the faster they can do that, the clearer they can do that, the better they will sail these boats.
You know, it's really noisy on board. We got a glimpse of that with that on board. You know, you cannot hear yourself. That's why they have the comms system. But sail with your teammates long enough. You don't need to say very much. They intuitively know, you know, what you're thinking and what you're planning to do.
So the Australians way out in front at the moment, top of your screen, with the Chinese not a million miles behind, the Brits in third place at the moment as they head upwind. And we've spoken to the sailors a fair bit over the last fortnight, and they all say that foiling tacks, tough, much tougher to pull off than the foiling jibe, Shirley.
particularly when it's light. You've so little power to deal with. You can imagine these great big foils, the drag from them under the water. Make one little mistake, you're building speed for a long time.
Chinese making up a bit of ground on the British boat at the moment. Out to the side of them. At what stage do these sailors begin to look over their shoulder, Shirley, and take a clear view as to what the other boats are doing and the tactics surrounding all of that? Because, of course, the British potentially here are in a position where they could affect the wind of the Chinese boat.
They're thinking about that, discussing it all the time. And they're not going, 50 miles an hour today, so they've got a little more thinking time. Each boat will also have a tactician. Generally, it's the flight controller. And he has, his time to plan the attack.
So a tremendous response here from Tom Slingsby as he sails across Sydney Harbour, the waters that he knows so well. So excited to perform in front of a home crowd, a big crowd, of course, over on Shark Island for this opening day of racing. They've got a wonderful view. And the Australians putting on a bit of a show at the moment after that fourth placed finish in the opening race of the day.
In these conditions, you really want to be minimising the number of manoeuvres you do. And we've seen how costly, if it doesn't quite go according to plan, how costly that is. But beautifully executed here by the Australians. Lined that up with perfection.
Another very slick manoeuvre from those in green and gold. Slingsby, an America's Cup winner in 2013 with the USA as tactician, performed the same role in 2017 in Bermuda as well. But tight race in behind them between the French, USA and China also in the mix. And the Japanese coming up on the rails as well.
Billy Bisson is fast. Team France they have speed. They should stop turning the corners, I think. They really have a kind of natural speed to make the boat go quickly.
Really good pace being picked up here by the Japanese as they head towards the gate. The Australians are well clear at this point. The French trying to hunt them down. Relatively tight crossing between the British and the Japanese, and indeed the USA. The Chinese have slowed up a little bit. But this is a real tussle in the middle of the fleet. That's anybody's. Round the gate and downwind once more. And a little puff of breeze here for the Japanese, extending beyond the Americans and Rome Kirby.
The British have made a few mistakes, I think, out here today. They tacked there and got really slow and lost an awful lot of distance.
On board with the British team, Dylan Fletcher at the helm.
Stand by. Forward down.
And that high-pitched whine, quite obviously, just goes up and up and up the faster they go. Listening to Nathan Outridge speak a couple of days ago, he was describing that position in the cockpit there as like riding a freight train with a fire hose being blasted in your face. It's very hard to concentrate. It's quite hard to see sometimes. Not quite the extreme conditions today that are going to confound the skippers, but the Australians have really come up with the goods in race 2. Powering forwards towards the fourth gate.
If you can get clear from that first leg, sail your own race and not be controlled by others or having to make manoeuvres when you're perhaps not quite ready, then the Australians have done well here.
Seem to be in full control this time around, no doubt spurred on by what happened in race 1, but it's amazing how quickly ground can be made up, Shirley. We saw yesterday, didn't we, in very light air, crews that were, on some occasions, miles ahead of the fleet, ending up effectively being becalmed for a while, and other boats on the far side of the course picking up breeze, making huge gains in that time. And it would appear as if the Japanese have really found something over on that far side, because look at the speed they're going. Double the pace of the Australians, 30 knots of boat speed. They are screaming along right now.
They are not giving up, aren't they? Split tacks with the Australians at the bottom here, and still keeping that pace, 26 knots.
Well, battle is joined, make no mistake about that, between Nathan Outridge and the Japanese crew, and Tom Slingsby in the Australian boat. The two old rivals going head to head. The Japanese just looking a little bit unstable as they tack up wind. Australia have gone right to the boundary edge. But look at the gain the Japanese have made, Shirley. I mean, that is a sensational effort.
They just carried that pace and they kept it for a really long time. But to me, it seems like there's lighter winds in this bottom left-hand corner, and we see the British here struggling to do that maneuver as well. And you know, perhaps Tommy Slingsby, he wasn't going as quick, but he was going the right way, and he'll cross ahead.
Well, the Aussies have just about maintained their lead, but it is a slender one now, and we can be sure of a battle royal between these two.
Just up there.
Here we are with the Australians.
A great comeback by Rome Kirby also into this.
We talk about the responsibilities, the various different roles of all of these sailors, Shirley. The front two grinding, obviously allowing the wing trimmer to do his thing with the rope on the winch. The helmsman at the back, and the flight controller who is operating the foils and flying the boat at the height that they consider to be the optimum height.
Yeah, I mean, the driver has this turning mechanism on the wheel, twist grip, that he can control the flight all the time. It gets harder in the maneuver because you know, you can't swap the boat and fly it at the same time. So that's when the real finesse of the crews come together.
You can see exactly what's going on there with Tom Slingsby, those hands on the wheel, the twist grips that Shirley was talking about. I guess the responsibility grows as you head to the back of the boat effectively. We're kind of calling them the back three because they're the decision makers.
I mean, they're choosing to do lots of maneuvers. I'm quite surprised by this, but I think they're just covering the Japanese. They know what a risk Nathan Outridge is. They're just trying to stay with them, not give them an opportunity to pass them.
Slingsby and Outridge with such a rich history between them. A pair of them have been racing each other since early teenage years. This is where we are at the moment. The Australians out in front, not by a great deal, but they are heading towards the finish line.
It's good pressure filling into top of
This is going to be a terrific finish, you feel. Have the Japanese got something extra in the tank? Can they pull something out of the bag here?
Well, we heard a bit of the onboard comms from the Australian team. They're happy. Good breeze coming down their sides is what Tommy Slingsby said, and I think they're comfortable with their positioning.
Well, this is the battle that everybody wanted to see. These are the two favourites in the fleet. They've got the two most experienced men in charge, and Tom Slingsby looks to have found the necessary riposte from race one. Nathan Outridge drawing first blood, but it is the Australians this time around who are heading to the finish line in front and sailing an excellent race. Powered forwards, perhaps stung by what happened in race one. A fourth place was not what Tom Slingsby had in mind, but here he has repaired that damage and claims the victory on home waters in front of home fans. Nathan Outridge not too far behind, and a 1-2 of Australia and Japan, something we may get used to seeing over the course of the next weeks and months. back in the fleet. British and the French again, another very tight crossing between them. The Americans, though, looking to get on the podium, and they seem to have done enough at this stage. Again, a disappointing race to start with, to begin their campaign. And we've just learnt that there is, in fact, one more leg to go, so this is not done. And Australia and Japan will lock horns again at the front. Tom Slingsby looks as if he's really picked up an excellent bit of boat speed. Japanese not too far behind, but still with plenty of work to do. Shirley, in your expert opinion, are you seeing any wind shifts out there on the course? Are you seeing targets that they'll be trying to zone in on?
Yeah, it's not over yet. I mean, as we've seen all day, you know, it's really puffy course. Normally we have more pressure than this in Sydney Harbour, and so they'll really be looking for where the wind is stronger, but this battle's going to go all the way.
Well, it's a great sight. And it is nip and tuck. What have we got? Around about 100 metres between the two.
I mean, now the decision is, you know, how to line up so that you get round the gate and when you jibe relative to the boat behind.
So it's not over till it's over. Nathan Outridge will be feeling that very, very keenly.
Both of them still have a jibe to do.
Yeah, plenty of work still to be done here, and it's going to be very interesting to see exactly how this plays out. Nathan Outridge the first to jibe, and the Australians very, very tight to the mark. They're going to slow up here, but they're probably going to have enough to get through, and confirmation eventually, a little later than advertised, it must be said, out in front and claiming the victory. That was a tight decision by Tom Slingsby, but how relieved he will be to have held off the challenge of the Japanese and claimed his first win here in Sydney Harbour. Japanese in second place, and a good old battle between the two. Good mates, but better rivals. Battle for third is a tasty one. Britain and the USA going head to head. Britain taking them on. Taking them on and doing it very effectively. A little bit of extra pressure perhaps. Good response from the USA as well, and this is where the sailing can be dramatic as well. We've finished the race with first and second, Shirley, but the battles further down the fleet can be just as absorbing.
And Rum Kirby's done well here. He's just sort of slid the boat down. He's closed off that door to Dylan Fletcher and the British team, and defending his third very well.
So a third place finish for the USA. And one more tight-ish jibe for the British. Dylan Fletcher comes home in fourth place for Great Britain. A third and a fourth for the Brits so far. Big improvement from the USA, up from fifth to third, leaving the French and the Chinese, rather surprisingly, after their excellent start here this afternoon, at the moment held up at the back.
I think, Ali, these boats are hardest to sail in the light winds and in the extreme windy weather. And both, I think, these teams have come foul to just not quite pulling off a manoeuvre and struggling to build pace. And quickly you lose ground.
Well, this is tight as well. The French just about stealing a march on the Chinese here, and Billy Besson this time has located the finish line, and he's heading over it with some gusto. So a fifth place for the French outfit, leaving the Chinese to bring up the rear. And a little bit of relief, no doubt, after what went on in race one for Billy Besson. Looking forward to hearing the explanation of exactly what did happen. And the Chinese just about creeping through. So let's have a word now with Tom Slingsby, the skipper, of course, of the Australian boat. Tom, after what happened in the opening race, I'm guessing you're thrilled to be up on top of the leaderboard now after race 2. We're having trouble hearing from Tom at the moment. I think we're going to have to abandon that particular operation. No doubt the gremlins will be erased before too long. Tom Slingsby, no doubt, quietly celebrating on the inside after victory in race 2. Australia on top, Japan in second, and in third place this time around, the USA. So an interesting finish for the French and the Chinese as well, Shirley. It's hard to gauge just exactly what that first race finish will have done for Billy Besson, because it's the sort of thing, just as we're talking about momentum and belief for those who are coming in first and second, so too those kind of calamities tend to sap it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we don't really know what went on the boat and what the discussion was, or whether the electronics were working. And also, it's busy. The harbour, as you can see here, the harbour is full of boats. It's quite a confusing sight. So we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But he has moments of brilliance, doesn't he? Billy Besson flies.
Another fantastic race, the second race, Lisa, and we're starting to see some very, very close racing.
Yeah, we saw a lot of different things happen that race to last race. The start was super interesting, and Tom Slingsby, I think he had something to prove.
Yeah, Nathan Outridge in the Japanese boat, quite literally bull in a china shop, describes the way he approached the start line.
Yeah, Nathan came flying in from speed with 30 seconds to go, but unfortunately he just judged that distance a little bit wrong and was over at the start.
Certainly, I think if you're looking at the start line, Billy Besson, his real strength is that start line, isn't it?
Yeah, Billy's a great catamaran sailor. He's sailed fast boats for a very long time. He's a bit of a Yahoo guy as well, so I think he's enjoying the reaching starts, which is something new for him. But yeah, he's doing really well. Last 2 starts, brilliant starts.
Okay, redemption for Tom Slingsby though. And you've talked a lot when we're watching the race. You're discussing constantly those tactics and the decisions he's making.
Yeah, I think that the race course is changing, but what we saw different with the Australians is they were a bit more proactive. They did their manoeuvres before they ran out of wind, and they sailed a really good tactical race against the Japanese. You know, it was a bit of a one-on-one battle there in the last lap.
The other thing that you talked about was the settings on the boat. After that race one, he obviously hadn't got the boat set up the way he wanted it. What can he change on that will improve the performance?
Well, all the systems are exactly the same, but it really comes down to the decisions they're making. So these are 3-point foilers, so we only see one of the boards in the water, and when they turn the boat, they've got to change those boards. So the flight controller is calculating how much lift they're going to need to turn the boat, and the helmsman is going to decide how quick he's going to turn the boat.
Okay, lots of different things to control there, but the important part for Tom Slingsby is that A, it worked, and B, he was able to hold off a late charge from Nathan Outridge.
Yeah, in sailing there's a golden rule. You have to stay between your competitor and the next mark, and that's what we saw. There are a lot of boundaries on this course, so they need to calculate that. A little bit different to racing we've seen before, but yeah, Tom and the Australian team did a fantastic job.
Okay, no shortage of drama in that race. We've got one more to go. Well, 2 races down at the inaugural event of the SailGP Championship, and Shirley, Lisa, so much drama to pull apart there. That was fantastic racing.
It might not have been the wins we were hoping for, but yes, drama, close action. I mean, it was never over. It never felt like someone just walked away from it. It was great racing.
Okay, we're going to start at the beginning. We've got the replays now of this start, and we've said it before, but Nathan Outridge came at this like a bull in a china shop.
Yeah, Nathan pulled the trigger very early there. I did think that most of the boats were late, but he did slow down there. He did attack the Chinese. I don't know if he thought that maybe that Phil was the biggest competitor there, but unfortunately just judged the time of distance wrong and punched the line a second too early.
Shirley, he touches the line just a second before the race is live. What does he have to do then? What's the penalty?
Oh, you have to slow down and let everyone get ahead, and then you can start again. So I mean, it's painful because it was so nearly absolutely perfect. You know, at top speed, right on the line.
Another great start for Dylan Fletcher and the British team, and as well Billy Besson. He really seems to have the starts on rails.
I mean, I was quite impressed with the British. You know, they had an incident in the last race, but I think they got rid of the nerves and they started well, they raced well, and they had moments of good speed, so they'll be happy with that. Billy as well, you know, he recovered from that odd finish in the first race, and you know, good pace as well. Just manoeuvring is really hard in these light winds, and you know, if you're not smooth, you're going to lose a lot.
Okay, well that was critical as they came up to Mark 1. A lot of different decisions going on here. Tom Slingsby taking an early jibe and pushing the Brits out a little way.
I think Tom learnt from the last race that an early jibe isn't bad, but the racecourse has changed a little bit. The wind's shifted around to the left, so we're seeing a bit more pressure, and Tom tried to stay in the pressure, but the British actually had to do one less manoeuvre here.
But do you think, I mean, you know this harbour, do you think that it pushed them into a little dead spot there?
I think originally, but what happened is the British actually came out quite well out of this. So Tom was actually quite tactical here. You can see the rest of the fleet is jibe, so he's protecting them, lowering the risk, where the British took a bit of a risk here going further to the left-hand side of the course.
What was interesting, Tom was then able, he really, tactically, he was very, very clean, wasn't he?
Tom's a great tactical sailor. He sailed lasers, so it's all about the tactics there, and I think just, you know, didn't want to get the Japanese get one up on him again.
Okay, well, we can see gate 3, we've got a big, big lead extending out by the Australians. But I think it's on this point we can see, yeah, he's coming up through the top mark there and then bearing away. We talked about settings earlier, Shirley. These guys, Tom Slingsby obviously didn't have the boat set up the way he wanted in that race one. How would he have changed it for the second race?
Well, you know, they have all the information from all their competitors. I mean, pretty rare in sport to know what everyone else is doing. And some of the teams will have analysts looking at that data between the races. So you'll know how your competitors set up. It's fantastic, you know. And so that could have happened. But also, they're a pretty experienced bunch, and they'll just have had a look at the conditions and perhaps made a few tweaks.
Well, it was almost a masterclass from Australia in every sense, but we've got one more clip here. This is what happens when they get the manoeuvres wrong. We can see from on board the Australian boat going for a jibe here, and they ditched the front end. And that's one of the big dangers, isn't it?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of the manoeuvres haven't been as slick as we might like to see. But what that is there is they need to calculate their lift going into the manoeuvre, and they just didn't have enough lift, so their bow went down. We also saw it on other teams. They had too much lift, got really high, and then fell out of the sky.
I think, Ed, if you rush it, you fluff it. I mean, the platform has to be absolutely steady at the beginning of the manoeuvre, or it's never going to go well.
Well, the good news is that the wind's starting to pick up a little bit, so the third race could be even more exciting. But one of the nations who've come in to this championship is China, and the potential for sailing to grow in China is exponential. They're one of the designated development teams here, but they're under the close eye of one of the most accomplished veterans. He's shedding some of his experience on this bright young team.
G'day, I'm Phil Robertson, skipper of China SailGP team. So here we are at the SailGP event. Let's take a look inside.
How did you first find sailing, Phil?
Actually through my parents, to be honest. They actually met sailing and introduced us to it at a pretty young age.
There's 4 chase boats going out today.
I started an optimist and sort of worked up the youth classes in New Zealand, moved into bigger teams in keelboat racing, took it from there to the world with the match racing and transferred to the Cats when it started to be at the top of the sport. I guess this is where it just starts to get a bit real. We're under the boat right now, mighty red rocket China SailGP team. It was an easy decision, to be honest, to come and race in SailGP. It's the next level of sort of competition. I'd say it's a step above both those series and it's a challenge.
Where do you think the advantages lie for you here?
We've come from this sort of stadium style of racing, small boat fleets and tight courses. It's just got a whole lot faster. So here's a bit of our safety kit, I guess, that we wear on board.
You're skippering Team China. How's your Chinese?
I'll be honest, it's pretty difficult to learn. The boys have done a really good job the last few years to learn English. It's a language we need to take on for sure, and it's coming.
The team, they give us opportunity to learn the English during the racing. We are like a big family on the team.
You can see the potential in China, but it hasn't yet exploded, has it?
I think it's coming, and one of the greatest things about it is Horace, Leo and Black on our boat. They've all just won the Volvo Ocean Race.
We win the race. I think that is my biggest moment for my life.
There's a bit of hype in China now for sailing. We're on the edge of it and it's about to pop. Time to get kitted up. This part you can't film.
Well, a great start for the Chinese. Second place in the first race, and then they dropped down to fifth. But Phil Robertson will be back in just under 10 minutes for the next race. Ready? So, next race is less than 10 minutes away. All of the boats still out on the water. Lisa, third and final race of the day, and at the moment it's Japan who sit in the driving seat, a first place and a second place.
Yeah, we definitely expected Japan to do well with the experience. The three people at the back of the boat have all sailed these boats before together, and their two grinders have also sailed these boats before. So they know the boats well, and Nathan and Ian know this harbour very well.
That's it for Nathan Outridge, isn't it? He's got the combination. You said in the manoeuvres you need to be very smooth and you need to understand the boat. He's got the man hours in the boat, but he's got that gentle touch.
Yeah, Nathan's a very smooth sailor. He sailed a lot of foiling boats, so he knows what it's like to be out of the water, and he really understands how the boat works, and I think that's quite important. They've done a lot of training and a lot of wind. This is probably some of the lightest winds that they've seen, so he has sailed in these boats before, so he doesn't need to learn the wind here, and he doesn't need to learn the wind in Sydney Harbour, so he's got a little bit of an edge.
Okay, well, it's not just about bragging rights and national pride. There's also a cool $1 million up for grabs in this championship.
Let's talk about points. 6 countries, 5 events. $1 million up for grabs. At each Grand Prix, the 6 teams all race for points in a fleet race. The winner gets 10 points, 9 for second. Finish last, you get 5 points. Then repeat. 4 more fleet races, up to 50 points up for grabs. The 2 teams with the most points go head-to-head for the final match race. The winner gets glory, fame, and more points. The match race winner always finishes with at least 1 more point than the next best team. These points all add up to Marseille, where all the teams slug it out for yet more points. We add them all up, and the top 2 are announced. Now it's the final big match race. Winner takes all, the first champions of SailGP, and $1 million.
There's certainly a decent incentive there for all of these teams, but Tom Slingsby got a massive roar off the crowd here on the island. What's he going to do in the third race, because he needs to be strong here?
Obviously, they would have been really disappointed with the first race, and I think with a competitor like Tom, who's so fierce, that drives him to be better. But having that win there gives them the confidence. They know they can get around the course clean, and to be honest, anything could happen. That's what we've seen. The boats are close and staying out of trouble.
Okay, we're going to get stuck into that third race very shortly.
Thank you.
So we can take a look at the leaderboard after the first 2 races. So Japan up there with 19 points, 10 points for a win, 9 points for second. Australia there, 4th place in the first race, and then managed to win that second race. Great Britain in 3rd. Billy Besson, those fantastic starts really not paying off. He hasn't managed to deliver in the rest of the race yet.
Yeah, Billy will be pretty disappointed with that, especially with that first race. That they should have done better than that. But he's shown great promise. I know he's really nervous going into the racing. So They'll be happy that they're doing well, they just need to seal the deal.
You sail NACRA 17s, exactly the same boat as Billy. How much of a step up is it into these boats?
I think the thing with these boats is it's not just 2 of you on there. There's 5 people on these boats and we're going double the speed. There's also a lot of buttons and toggles. So we're just used to ropes and they've got buttons and toggles.
Okay, it promises to be a fascinating third race. You can see just how tucked in they are ahead of the start there. The Chinese, the British, Chinese, the USA, Australia and France. Prepare for the third race. Alistair Eskin and Shirley Robertson have the commentary.
So in the blink of an eye, we've arrived at the final race of the day, the final chance for these teams to make an imprint on day 1 of racing and accrue those valuable points. Broadly similar conditions to races 1 and 2. Beautiful late afternoon in Sydney. Ideal foiling weather without being too blustery. And so to the crowded start box for race 3. We caught up with the Chinese boat a little earlier, and here's what Phil Robertson and co were talking about.
Hey boys, we lost your countdown on the start as well. We couldn't hear the countdown from the start. You guys are doing a big grind, try and still really yell the countdown. Nice. Stand by.
So for the Chinese, a 2nd place finish and last in race 2. They will look to finish strong, as everybody will. And here again, the Japanese challenge is looking strong, Shirley. They look to be timing this nicely with 10 seconds to go.
They came in with pace, but the Australians, they have dominated this start so far. They obviously know where they want to start, and they're holding out the British. They're trying to stop the British getting in there. Beautiful start.
A little bit of bully boy tactics, if you like, from the Australians as they head over the start line in fine style. The British in 2nd place. The Japanese chasing them down, but with nothing like the same boat speed at the moment. The USA, China and France struggling off the line a little bit, and Billy Besson's day does not seem to be getting any better. Just hovering along at around about 10 knots, but in stark contrast, Australia flying, Britain flying, Japan flying.
30 knots the Australians are doing. There's hardly any wind. It's quite something.
Flashing across the water, the Australians out in front as they reach Mark 1, with the British tucked in behind. The Japanese again with good boat speed, and this time the Americans hanging on to the coattails at this early stage as they head downwind for the first time in this final race of the day. The final race, of course, which will be the one that remains in the forefront of their minds as they rest up tonight.
Tactically, the decision is, when do you jibe? If you jibe too early, you've got more manoeuvres. If you jibe too late, you might get wing wash, or you might hit the boundary.
Relatively tight to the boundary, the British tightest of the lot, but again it's Slingsby who's dictating play. But as he looks in his rear view mirror, he won't have to look too far to find Nathan Attridge breathing down his neck. That tends to be the way of things. Foiling nicely. And just maintaining that equilibrium, that stability, and planning, all the time planning, Shirley, because these manoeuvres, they take a bit of planning.
Yeah, I mean, if you get out in front, then you're not controlled by anyone else. And I think we will see the Australians lay down into the gate, so less manoeuvres than everyone else. Certainly that's what they'll be hoping for. Minimise the manoeuvres, minimise the down speed.
So another very determined, punchy start from Tom Slingsby. Little doubt that he was stung into action after race 1.
Yeah, sorry, yours. Turning up in 2, 1, turning up.
And just look at the way they're rounding the mark. That is just about textbook, isn't it?
They made it look easy. not easy to keep the platform absolutely level throughout all that and keep your pace, but lovely job by the Australian team.
Not all that easy, needless to say, to be heading at speed across the platform, as these sailors do now when they're travelling at the kind of paces that they do. You'll see that they're all attached, they're all tethered to the safety rope. That's to prevent any possibility of them heading overboard. And of course, in a fleet of 6, great problems potentially with boats following on behind at high speed. So safety paramount.
The Japanese got slow here, Ali. Just 2 more manoeuvres, really down speed.
They've got snarled up at the downwind gate. And there'll be a bit of frustration out there at the moment. Nathan Outridge heading off towards the boundary to try to find a little bit of pressure. The wind hunting is never ending, of course. The USA currently in 3rd place. The French creeping through the fleet after their very sluggish start.
Best pressure's the other side. I think we should go here, guys. Okay. 2, 1. Big gust.
I think the voice you can hear is that of Tom Slingsby on board Australia. And they've made the decision that actually they reckon the wind is to the far side of the course, the way the Chinese are heading. Of course, they're yet to go through the gate, the Chinese.
It's really different pressure on each side and not the same each time they go up it as well. And so it's great to hear that dialogue between Tom Slingsby and Jason Waterhouse, who's tactician on board. But they sound pretty happy about where they're positioned on the course and where they're going.
Yeah, high mode. We're pressing now. Copy.
Australians now, Ali, just in more wind, just extending away from the Japanese and the rest of the competition.
Everybody in perfect harmony, seemingly, on board the Australian boat, and they're putting really comfortable, clear water between themselves and the rest. Right to the boundary edge they go. All the spectator boats lined up alongside, getting their best view.
All right, yep, 2, not popping. 2, 1, popping, yep, copy.
When they say popping, it's when they're inverting the wing. So when they pop the wing and it gets its maximum depth, its maximum shape, and then you accelerate, hopefully, onto the foils.
Copy. Just going to press a little here.
What a sight. Australia out in front in Sydney. It's how Tom Slingsby would have written it.
Yeah, everything we can to flat.
Few better natural venues for this kind of racing, this kind of high-octane, water-based activity. They love their sport out here, quite obviously, and the Australian crew putting on something of a show for them as they head closer and closer to Shark Island.
When listening to them on board, Ali, they seem really relaxed and confident. It's very calm, even though they're doing, a lot of speed. It's very calm on board.
Turning early. Wheels, copy.
Dangerous business, leaving the wheel, but it has to be done. Not something you do if you were driving at 45 miles an hour in your car.
He doesn't just abandon it, Ali. The wing trimmer, who always goes across first in a manoeuvre, he will take the wheel, which allows the helmsman to cross. And you heard the dialogue, actually. You got it, copy. They wouldn't just let it go. I'm not sure what would happen then.
Another really good example of the teamwork and the partnership necessary on board. A reason why so many of them are sailing with men and indeed women that they've sailed with so much on board the French. For an example, Billy Besson has Marie Rieu alongside him, 4 times world champion and a winner of the Volvo Ocean Race quite recently as well. And that partnership is a very, very strong one. So important that they have that chemistry, that telepathy almost.
They're great sailors. I mean, I'm a massive fan of Mari Ryu. Wherever you put her, whether it's sailing around the planet or on a boat doing 50 miles an hour, she quickly adapts and learns. So I'm expecting, as we see this season develop, I'm expecting great things from them.
Well, the Japanese slowing right up. They're still on the upwind leg. The Australians are long gone on the downwind leg. And there is nobody to touch Tom Slingsby and crew at the moment. Nathan Outridge the closest, but with a heck of a job on his hands.
I think for sailors watching this, they're not used perhaps to seeing such distances between the competitors, but you know, these boats are so fast. A couple knots more of wind, just get an extra puff and you're doing 10 more knots, and that's the reason we're seeing, you know, massive differences in positioning.
So the Japanese heading downwind at good speed. Billy Besson's French outfit in behind them. And of course, they'll all be studying, won't they, tonight? They'll be studying the data that's come off these boats. They'll be looking at the best maneuvers, the best tacks, the best jibes of all the crews, and they'll be working out what they need to do to be better tomorrow. That collaborative element is something that's so different, of course, from an event like the America's Cup, where everybody's playing secret squirrel with their ideas and everything to do with their boat handling.
I spoke to Mari Ryu about that. She said you almost put in as much time in the analysis afterwards, learning off, you know, off the Japanese or off the Australians, getting their settings and the timings for the maneuvers, and you know what a tool that is, and how unique in sport to know what your opposition are up to.
I think it's taking a bit of getting used to as well for some of the sailors. They're not used to sharing in quite the same way as the Australians continue to power forwards.
We occasionally get a shot of the lines on the foils, and you know, if they can keep the flight between those lines, that is golden. And so the sailors will be looking at that. Obviously, we can see that off the boat, and they'll also look at the ride height. They're looking at the leeward bow to see how high it is. Too high out the water, and then you lose control. Too low, too much drag.
Quite hard to see, but the lines that Shirley was talking about on the foils that drop down and provide the lift for the boats, and that's one of the visual cues, isn't it, for the flight controller to make sure that he's measuring things up. It's such an act of precision. Japan at speed, but a long way behind at the moment.
You can never write them off, though. I'm sure the Australian team know exactly where they are.
Tight to the boundary and a lot of ground to make up. Some 250 metres between Australia and Japan. The Australians close to closing the deal here on day one, a day that they will be pretty pleased with, you would suggest, bouncing back from that 4th place in race 1.
The Japanese have not raced well. I mean, they go fast, the maneuvers are really smooth, but just to me, not, you know, they haven't nailed any of the starts. They haven't dominated this race course like perhaps we expected from them. Maybe they're just relying on their pace.
And once again, you get a good example of the instability of the French. They're capable of sailing at high speed and with real panache. It sounds like a cultural cliche, but actually the examples that we keep giving of Billy Besson's crew suggests the erratic nature of their sailing is really costing them. And if they could just try to thread together a little bit more consistency, you feel they'd be dangerous.
It's early days. I mean, I think some of the teams have only had maybe 9 days training, so the learning curve is steep.
Hold up a little. Oh, sorry, you're going to keep going, sorry, that's it, that's right. Yeah, agreed. 120. Okay, I reckon we're there. Okay.
enjoying their day out on the water. And why wouldn't they? They're looking in fine fettle, very much in control. There's no panic. Easy to panic in that environment, I imagine, Shirley.
Yeah, I mean, we saw them cross the boat there as well. They made that look easy, but they all talk about the G-force. And some of the guys who are new to this kind of sailing say how hard it is to get from one side to the other. Imagine turning in a car even at 30 miles an hour. And you want to turn quick because you want to get the turn over with and get accelerating again.
Well, the experience of Tom Slingsby and indeed the experience of Nathan Outridge, perhaps dictating a rather more aggressive approach. Those who are not so used to the way the boat is handled, just being a little more careful in their manoeuvring. But day by day, all of that's improving, and it has to be stressed. This is race 3 of event number 1, so there is such a long way to go. And the standard of all of these crews will improve substantially, race by race, hour by hour.
Okay, popping here.
You know, and there's nowhere to hide. If you're good, if you know how to set your boat up and you know how to sail it well, you know, now everybody else can see that.
Japanese in a rather vain attempt at the chase. It's just too great, this distance, it seems, even if they somehow manage to find an extra bit of wind. The Australians look gone. Hesitate to predict anything in this sport, particularly with the fluctuations of the wind speed, but Japan some way off the Australian pace at the moment.
This venue, you really have to get used to. When we were here for the Olympics, we came for years in advance. There's so many variables, and I think we're seeing a little bit of that with the Australian team. This is where Tom Slingsby lives, where he grew up. He just knows the place inside out, and it's particularly challenging today in these light conditions. And they seem very comfortable and very determined about where they want to go and when they want to be there.
So the Aussies heading for the finish line.
Yeah. They could be on the lap before. Okay, copy. Okay.
Some interesting characters on board there, by the way. Kai Hurst, one of the grinders at the front of your shot there, is a man who's taken part in the America's Cup, but he's also an Olympic swimmer, and he's won 4 separate Australian Ironman titles. He's a useful man to have, generating the power that allows the wing trimmer to do his bit.
Just in front of him, Jason Waterhouse, silver medalist in Rio, in the sort of scaled down version of these boats, so no stranger to this kind of pace.
So the Australians heading to the finish line, and the Chinese, don't be fooled by their presence. They've been lapped. The Australians across the line in commanding style, and it is the Aussies dominating down under on day 1 of SailGP in Sydney. Tom Slingsby, terrific effort from him and his crew. 4th in race 1, but winning race 2 and race 3. Fabulous effort. No doubt plenty to take out of those 3 races. They will be forensic in their analysis, but as a building block, doesn't get a whole lot better.
And they came to Ali with confidence. The last 2 starts, they commanded that. They knew where they wanted to be, and they bossed. they bossed everyone else around, even Nathan Outridge, who we're looking at here. He has a lot to think about tonight.
Stay with it, Nate.
Well, he talks about the competitive spirit, and Nathan Outridge will not be happy that his rival has stolen the headlines after a wonderful start. But they've been tremendously consistent, and they will be taking a great deal of comfort from that. I think we are going to see a real ding-dong between these two as the months play out in SailGP across the different events. Just 1 point separating those two on the leaderboard now. Japan coming home in second place behind Australia. So the Australian day is done, so too the Japanese. Elsewhere, France in third. Chinese, I think, still making their way upwind. So let's see if we can have a word now with Tom Slingsby. We tried a little earlier. Tom, I hope you can hear me now. Congratulations, first and foremost. You've raced a terrific race there, also in race 2. How much were you spurred on by what happened in the first race?
Honestly, if you saw any of the onboard comms in the first race, I was pretty annoyed. And we improved every race, and that was a really good race for us, our best one yet.
So tell us, give us a little flavour of exactly what you did in races 2 and 3 that you didn't manage to pull off in the first outing.
We were just making easy mistakes. We weren't driving well, our manoeuvres weren't good. We've got to go back and look at that. In the light of the wind, the worse we were going. So we came good at the end, and more breeze the better for us Aussies.
Excellent. And how important for you to set out on the path that you wanted to here on home waters, this harbour you know so well, Tom, and of course all the fans, particularly those on Shark Island. A big day and some big results for you and for them.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're actually in the spectator fleet now. We're just on the course boundary, and it's amazing to see all this support. This is huge. There's super yachts I've never seen before here. There's people everywhere, all cheering for us. It's pretty nice.
And needless to say, your great friend, but your better rival, Nathan Outridge, breathing down your neck. It's been you two broadly for the best part of today. No surprises there, I'm guessing. You'll be relishing that battle.
Yeah, always. No, I've always got an eye on Nathan, and he might be ahead of us by a point or so, but we beat him 2 races to 1, so it's a pretty even day for us. We know that if we do what we did in the last couple, he's not going to catch us. So it's out of his hands in my eyes. It's all in our hands. If we perform, we'll beat him. That's the way I look at it.
Great to hear from you, Tom. Thanks very much. Enjoy your evening, and we look forward to seeing you in action tomorrow.
Will do, thank you. We lapped them.
Just that single point separating Australia and Japan.
Well, this is the finish, isn't it?
The rest of the fleet going strong.
Rounding up and pitching it down.
So the British coming in 4th place, the French in 3rd position at the moment.
Are we allowed to exit? What's the plan now? Is that not 3 races?
Again, big fluctuations in the breeze out there seemingly. The Americans still going at a reasonable pace, and the British have slowed right up. And there are the Chinese. They are the only remaining boat a leg behind, and having endured a difficult day, I think it's safe to say. They began so strongly, finished 2nd in race 1, and then a couple of places right down the bottom of the fleet, which will be disappointing, but it's early days and plenty still to learn. So the day really all about the Australians. Japanese providing a very strong challenge, but with 2 wins out of 3, the Australians enjoying an excellent day on the water. The Japanese too, those 2 dominating our day.
quiet and go through.
I don't know how much closer we can go. Probably about it.
Not much, let's see it. Foil hard.
Good boy. Yeah, okay, good puff.
One really good puff.
Little lap around. It's gonna roll down. That mark. There it is.
Well, some wonderful shots there of Tom Slingsby and his team celebrating their second win of the day. Lisa, a phenomenal achievement for him after a rocky start.
Yeah, it's never good to start like that, but Tom showed that he means business with 2 really convincing wins and just extended his lead in that last one.
I've heard that one of his biggest attributes is his fierce desire to win at all costs.
Yeah, I'm sure Tom's having a great time out there, but he has the most serious face, very different to Nathan, who's laughing his way around the course. So, yeah, Tom did mention in the onboards that if anyone saw him in the first race, he wasn't happy. So they can definitely go home happy tonight.
Okay, let's take a good look at the race, though. He made it look, we've said deceptive before, but he made it look very, very easy. He was commanding on the start, really made his presence felt.
Yeah, the Australians really controlled that start. They held everybody back, and then they were able to press their. They were able to go when they wanted to go and leave everybody behind. And you know, with the wind picking up like this, once they got around the top mark, they were gone.
Interestingly, with the wind that we're seeing, though, it's not quite enough to keep the boats foiling through the manoeuvres, is it? And that means that there's big holes potentially for people to catch up if someone drops off the foil and then can't get back on.
Yeah, so we have just under 10 knots, which is pretty much the crossover. And yeah, if they don't keep the boat foiling or they take too long to get it back up, then they're just going to get overtaken in an instant.
And that, for me, was where the experience of Tom Slingsby showed.
Yeah, they had very, very clean manoeuvres, very opposite to the first race of the day. But yeah, the Japanese had good manoeuvres, but everyone else was really struggling when the wind got up.
A couple of people who didn't, China and Great Britain, both really struggling in that third race.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what was going on those boats. I don't know if there was a lack of communication or they weren't getting what they needed out of the boats.
Okay, it's been a dramatic day of racing, but we have had 3 races. We're going to be wrapping it all up very shortly. Whew, time to take a breath and gather ourselves. It's been dramatic. We've got Shirley Robertson back in the studio with us alongside Lisa Darmanin. 3 fantastic races today. Everything you expected, Shirley?
I mean, I guess everyone would have liked a little bit more wind, but we had drama and action and you know, they don't want to go in, do they? They finished racing, but they're still sailing about. And, you know, it's a great opening day and a really commanding performance from the Australians.
Lisa, were you surprised? It felt to me like everyone came out quite confidently. We've heard chat of people being very nervous in these boats still, but it didn't show.
I think it's been a long time coming. These teams have thought about this for months. They've been training as hard as they can, trying to get the most out of their boats. So, you know, there's nerves, but there's so much excitement and readiness amongst the sailors.
Do you think that was an element of what happened to Tom Slingsby, maybe? In the first race, it was nerves and pressure that got to him?
I think maybe. He certainly answered it in the next 2 races. Yeah, I mean, there was a huge amount of anticipation. There's been a massive build-up, particularly for the Aussies, you know, national heroes here. And so maybe an element of that. But I think, remember here, you know, all the sailors are good. And, you know, one mistake, though, you're punished hard. I mean, they're terribly humbling, I think, for everyone. You know, especially in a day like today when it's light. As Lisa's been saying, it's so hard to keep the pace on. And if you get into, you know, a light bit of wind or you just fluff a manoeuvre a little bit, you know, you look pretty stupid. And actually, it's pretty hard. I mean, the hardest boats on the planet to race.
Well, you can see the Australians there taking a lap of honour around some of the mega yachts that have parked up to watch this race. And I imagine after that, very frightening first race for Tom Slingsby with the amount of pressure he'd put on himself and the expectation of everyone else watching. Having seen him practising, he's now in a commanding position for day 2.
I think Tom's really proud to finally be back in the green and gold. He does keep saying that, you know, Tom hasn't raced for Australia since 2012, so I think they're pretty happy to be on home turf wearing the right colours.
I've been impressed by how he sailed the last two races. You know, he wasn't controlled by anyone. He decided what he wanted to do. He controlled the whole fleet, and you know, even just listening to the onboards, very relaxed, you know, very systematic. He knew where he wanted to go, and you know, really impressive performance by them. And I think Team Japan, I mean, they have a lot to think about tonight. They're going to have to raise their game tomorrow. It's not good enough just to be, you know, to hang back at the start and be fast. He's going to have to deliver some sharp racing if he's going to beat the Aussies.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the start now, because that was the crux of this race, and I think where Tom Slingsby really stamped his mark on things.
Tom was so demanding on this start. He didn't want to let anyone get ahead of him. He controlled the fleet from the very beginning, and he was able to put his foot on the accelerator when he wanted to.
Yeah, he catches this lift here, and he's accelerating in the perfect position, isn't he?
I mean, he gave nobody the room to come at that with speed. Not easy to do. I mean, he controlled 5 other boats. He said, this is where I'm going to start. I'm going to get the best start. And look at that, 30 knots already. What a start.
Yeah, that was a King Kong start, wasn't it? He puffed out his chest and started beating it in front of everyone. The one thing to pick out here, though, Dylan Fletcher consistently starting very well.
You know, Dylan's a great racer. He's a street fighter. You know, he knows how to get a boat to the start line at speed. You know, he's making errors later on in the course. You know, moments of brilliance and then, you know, bad manoeuvre or sailed into a lull or a penalty we saw earlier in the day. So, you know, he also needs to, I don't know, take a deep breath perhaps and relax into it.
Okay, well, you can see them rounding the first mark here. And Rowan Kirby, interestingly, back there in fourth, the American, has just started to up things. He's got great straight line speed, it feels like, but he's struggling, as we've said so many times today, with the manoeuvres.
Yeah, I think Rome's having trouble getting around that first mark in good shape. And then when you're back in the pack, you know, it is hard when there's lots of other boats to worry about. But when he does get clear, he has great speed. But as we've seen today, turning corners is pretty tricky.
Okay, back to the leaders. Australia came around that first mark, and it was the finesse and that experience in Tom Slingsby's sailing that really showed here. And he stretched out a big lead very early on.
You know, the Australians decided themselves when they wanted to jibe, and you know, lovely pressure. They nearly laid down without another manoeuvre, and you really want to limit the number of manoeuvres you do because you lose so much pace. But you know, beautifully commanding position. No one can touch him here.
What's interesting here, you can see like the Australians have just got the edge on the Japanese. You can see the Americans disappearing out, but down here in third position, I find this fascinating. The Brits have got a really nice position and then they drop straight off. When we take a look at this, something happens and the boat is stricken for nearly a minute.
Yeah, I think what happened was, the boards and the rudders, they have to move using hydraulic pressure, and there's actually a pump that sits inside the boat that powers that. So we can see they're completely stopped. I'm not sure it's this exact reason, but if you can't move your foils, you can't fly at all. So they're probably trying to troubleshoot here, and that would be my guess.
Okay, well, it definitely cost them a place in the podium spots there. One person who got to enjoy the glory though, and I'm sure he'll have the smell of victory on him this evening, is Tom Slingsby. And we can see the Australian boat now on board as they're taking their victory lap around Sydney Harbour. It is still the first day. We don't want to go too early too soon, but a successful day on home turf.
Yeah, I mean, he's got another day to go, and I'm sure, you know, his data is available to everybody, and I'm sure they'll all be studying it. As we speak now, most of the teams have at least 1 or 2 analysts analysing everyone's data. So a really unique position in sport, I think, that you know what your opposition are doing. So, yeah, I wouldn't be celebrating too hard.
I think it's really important to remember that every day is different, and these teams are still learning. So not only is everybody going to be looking at Tom, but Tom's going to be looking at himself, and they're just trying to get the most out of their team.
Okay, well, one person he's had an up and down day, and we've talked about him a little bit, but Billy Besson in the French boat, along with Marie Rio, they've got great speed in this boat, showing moments of brilliance, but they just don't have the consistency yet.
I mean, you race against him. He's got this amazing natural flair. You can never write him off. Great speed. He knows how to make a boat go fast.
and he knows which direction to go, but their manoeuvres have really let them down.
Yeah, Billy's a fantastic catamaran sailor, and that's why I think we're seeing him push the starts. But yeah, as Shirley mentioned, the manoeuvres are letting them down. But what I think it's important to note here is that this is the first day of SailGP. There's a lot more races to go, so I wouldn't count them out.
Well, Shirley, you talked earlier on about courage being one of the most valuable commodities. I get the feeling that Billy Besson has plenty of that.
Yeah, you know, he's from Tahiti. He's a real island boy. He surfs. He's so brave, isn't he, in Olympic sailing? And I've seen him actually before the games in Rio, 4 times world champion. Everyone expected them, you know, to walk away with that gold medal, and he broke his vertebrae before the first race. And he sailed an Olympic Games with a broken back. You know, he's tough, he's brave, and you know, he'll come back from this.
It gives you an idea of the grit of the man. Tomorrow is going to be very, very interesting. We can take just a moment now to take a look at the Australian finish. This was a big, big moment, and right in front of Shark Island. There was a roar came up here.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting here because China's in the shot, but China's actually a lot behind here. But yeah, the Australians were really happy, and they really extended their lead throughout the race.
It'd be interesting to see, studying again those data, as you said, Shirley, to see what happened to Phil Robertson, because he did have a shocking second and third race.
You know, sailing fans who are watching this around the world are going to think, you know, what kind of sailor is Phil Robertson? But these boats are so humbling. One little mistake, it's, you know, hundreds of meters that you will lose. And I think, you know, that's what we're seeing. It's just tiny differences in the manoeuvres, or you sail into a light spot and you end up being lapped. And we don't see that in this sport.
It's credit to Tom Slingsby. I think we saw very, very few mistakes in that last race. We can take a look at the leaderboard now, though. After the first day of racing, 3 races down, and Japan, helmed by Nathan Outridge, have dropped just 2 points out of a possible 30. Tom Slingsby tucked in just behind him. Great Britain, helmed by Dylan Fletcher, on 22. Still within shouting distance of those top 2 spots for tomorrow's match racing. And we've got Rowan Kirby, Phil Robertson and Billy Besson, United States, China and France. So a lot of improvement there for Billy Besson, but what a day of racing it's been. Sum it up, Shirley. Dream come true watching these things race?
I mean, I am amazed. There's hardly any wind here. I'm sure Lisa thinks the same. And they were doing 30 knots of wind. The potential to see some fast and furious sailing here in Sydney Harbour is incredible.
Okay, Lisa, Shirley, thank you so much for all of your insight. We're going to be back here in Sydney Harbour tomorrow with 2 more fleet races and then the final match race. We'll see you then.